What I would want from the government is safe borders, you know what I mean? Like protection from invasion. I would want the protection of my rights. I would want limited government intervention in the free market, in business and things like that. Um, I would like to know that there are things in place for those who need it, like programs in place for those who need it. But I would also want to know that there are checks and balances in place to make sure that those programs are doing what they are intended to do. Because I know how waste can go when it comes to, like when it comes to government money. A lot of these agencies see it as free money, and they get that money and they do whatever the hell they want with it. They have nonprofits that are supposed to be curing poverty, but when you understand like the rules behind nonprofits and things like that, they only really have to dedicate about 7% of what they bring into actual charitable causes, and the rest can go back into the company as far as salaries and bonuses and all that type of shit. They just can't make a profit, quote unquote. So I would want, honestly, what's happening right now is exactly what I want. Like I'm very happy and pleased with the fact that all of these government agencies are being scrutinized and looked into. I understand the controversy behind it. I understand why people might not trust the process, but I'm happy that it's happening in general, because I feel like, we've had so much talk about it for generations, so much talk about it for years, and there literally has been no one checking to see how people are spending this money, what they're doing with the money, how it's trickling down. Is it going to the causes it's supposed to? So I want that type of government accountability. What I also want is a president that I feel like gives a shit about the American people. Like I want somebody there that I feel like genuinely likes the country. Like when they talk about the country, I want them to talk about here, where I live and where I grew up and was born, as though it's the best place in the world. And if it's not the best place, I want them to talk about it as though they want to make it the best place in the world, And for me, I feel as though that's what I'm getting in this administration. So I think all the things that I personally want, I can't speak for other Black people, I can't speak for other people, I can only speak for myself. The things that I've always wanted as an individual, I'm seeing it.
Just day to day, right? Organizations like mine, Chicago Scholars, which you mentioned, serves 98% Black and Brown students, 89% students from low income communities to complete college and get jobs, are at an existential crisis, both from a budgetary perspective, but also like at the core of the work that we do. DEI, and we use a term called READY, which is racial justice, equity, accessibility, diversity, and inclusion, a term you helped us build in our organization, and not just a term, but a, the DNA of how we're actually wired is part of our work, is being, not only shredded, but there is legal doctrine, right? The presidential executive order that has, been reissued, because what was actually sent down the pipeline yesterday is effectively just a reissue of the Supreme Court decision from 2023, the court decision to students for fair admissions versus Harvard, that, unless under strict scrutiny, DEI in higher ed must go away in all forms and facets. That's admissions, financial aid, hiring, and institutional programming, which means student life, res life, Greek organizations. It's so broad that it can weave there. So yeah, I mean, it's effectively affecting me and my work at every single level, from when we think about DEI and higher ed, and then into the actual workforce, the companies that were partnering with us and have been partnering with us.
That point you just brought up around res life, Office of Multicultural Student Affairs, these sorts of spaces. When we're talking about higher ed, y'all, I was often participating in the Black Student Union when I went to DePaul University. I was in programs like I was in Upward Bound programs when I was a teenager, in high school, that was trying to get me college ready. I was in college access programs for low income students and students of color with Northeastern Illinois University when I was in grammar school. Like these specific programs that gave us these pathways into seeing things differently. Like growing up in North Lawndale, I didn't see a lot of white folks except on TV.
Mm-hmm.
If I went downtown, I didn't socialize in these sorts of ways. I didn't have all the time the access even to those spaces. And let's talk about more about what that is these are social and relational spaces where entire career trajectories can be changed when you have access into them. These are ways of understanding life that break the idea that often poverty creates for us. When we're living in entrenched systemic poverty, we think that this is the world and this is it. And you get out into these other spaces through these programs and these pipeline opportunities, and you're like, oh, there's more. And what the DOE is doing right now is shredding those programs, shredding the permission for those programs by starting with the funding. Now it's moving statutorily. And I want to just pull out for everybody who's listening, a lot of this stuff isn't moving necessarily through law. It's moving through guidance and fear.
That's right.
These are like what the DOE put out. In many ways, they're not being very specific. Like when Trump says illegal DEI, there's not really specificity around that. Yeah. And that's what creates the culture and the environment of fear for a lot of people. And I think that there's a lot of preemptive fear about, well, I can't have my money get hit. So let's just get rid of this program. Let's get rid of this department. Let's get rid of these staff. Let's get rid of these folks. But I just want to just raise the bell that if anybody out here is over the age of like 23, and you're a person of color, or you're a young woman, or you're LGBTQ, and you went through a university experience, you probably had access to some of these programs. And your life was probably touched, or your friends' lives were probably touched, if not your parents or your neighbors or otherwise, were probably touched by the presence of these types of programs. And ripping of those things out without a real a solution or resource for what will still allow us to ensure that these types of folks like you and I are engaging in these spaces, it spells for at minimum confusion, but really it's a groundbreaking shift in the ways in which people are able to access opportunity when we haven't done the work of systemic change in our country to ensure that they don't need those programs.
As far as the DEI, I've been in HR for 13 years. HR director, I ran a DEI program. I agree with Country Cookie. It was never about Black people. Like when we go through the hiring process, there's no category or no ranking that's like, are they DEI eligible for hire? We never look at that. DEI was specific projects, like we did a room for the Islam people to be able to do their prayers. We did a project where we installed a gym for like health and wellness. We made sure, because they would fine you, we made sure that we had the ramps all the way through the warehouse and that everything was inclusive of other people. And we hosted these classes, like they would send us stuff, and you guys have sat in them, where they like they put a slideshow in and you follow the prompts and it's telling you like what inclusion is and what that looks like. But these aren't things that are considered when you hire people. So I don't know where that came from. Like I honestly was baffled. And when I talk to people that work in my industry, everybody that's in HR, they're all like, what? That has absolutely nothing to do with what we're hiring for. And I think what happened is the Democrats just say stuff and run with it. And then it just like catches fire, but it's no truth in what they're saying. Maybe back in the day during affirmative action, because my mom was hired with affirmative action. She can tell you she was an affirmative action hire, but that is not what DEI is. Never meant for that. It's literally diversity and inclusion. As far as what I want from the government, I absolutely want my reparations. I absolutely want to be paid because my ancestors worked for over 400 years in this country for free, right? So in my mind, back to my HR, you can't go work for somebody and not get free labor out of somebody for like 3 years, right? You're going to get sued. You're going to have to pay them money, right? So I would like cash payments in hand, like they pay the other indigenous people, like they pay the Jews, who that didn't even happen over here. They have all of this money, just cut the check. Like whatever you want to do with your check, go do it. You have millions of us that are going to do right, feed the economy, start businesses. Oh, time is up.
Yeah.
Cut the check.
I really hope they do give reparations so this conversation can end. Like, I really would just love to. I just wanted to add that. Like, I hope they just give out the money so everybody can shut the fuck about reparations, so we could just move on and never have that as an excuse again. Go ahead, Luis.
Yeah, I want to say this real quick because I know it's been hinted on about, accommodations and things like that. Like, the Americans with Disabilities Act was an initiative that started in the 70s and progressed into the 80s. In 77, I believe it became full and act. And that was to, it took to account to create accommodations for people to get into buildings, like handrails, ramps, all these things. And not only people who are impaired to just a wheelchair, but people who are visually impaired, hearing impaired, right, who have mobility issues and all things like of that nature. So I believe that initiative covered a lot of that. So when we talk about people having access, it can't be that, because on a state level and on a national level, that is something that's mandated. Like we can't have any, like I'm in this side and I check for that stuff to make sure, because we could be sued. That's a huge problem. As far as DEI is concerned, I agree with everything else. I do think that it's oversighted, and I think that from a political standpoint, I think the left has really hijacked the word and created it something to be a monster that it's not. Are you?
All right.